Correspondent Stearns now joins me on the line from the commercial capital of Abidjan. Good evening, Scott.
Good evening, Shaka.
How are you? Are you safe from where you are talking to us?
Yeah, plus or moins. I mean, it all depends on what quartier you are here in Abidjan. But for the moment, okay.
Give us a sense as to what the mood really is like. What kind of mood are you experiencing from your vantage point?
Well, there are clearly many different moods in Abidjan. If you're a resident in Plateau, you have probably still not left your house for the last 2 weeks because there are snipers in some of the tall buildings who Ouattara, French, and UN forces, even today, were still trying to rout. However, if you live in the Kumasi neighborhood, for example, this morning, nearly all the shops were open. Young men with motorbikes queued to get petrol. The supermarkets were open. The pharmacies were open. People were sitting out having coffee, saying Ivory Coast has entered its new phase. So Abidjan, which is a big city, it has many quartiers. Some of the neighborhoods are calm. Other neighborhoods, Cocody, parts of Cocody, parts of Plateau, there are still definitely security issues there.
Now, talking about Cocody and Plateau, those happen to be, of course, strongholds of former President Laurent Gbagbo. Have you had an opportunity, Scott, to venture into one of Laurent Gbagbo's strongholds? And if you have, what impression did you get from being there? Well,
there are clearly Gbagbo supporters who are still in those areas. As you said in that report from Paul Cisco, Mr. Gbagbo, in a brief appearance on Mr. Ouattara's television, did call on his supporters to lay down their weapons. Mr. Gbagbo's Army Chief of Staff, Philippe Mangou, calling on former soldiers formerly loyal to Mr. Gbagbo to report for duty this morning to restore calm in Abidjan, said that it's time to stop the chaos, that people with weapons who were not to have weapons would be arrested and face justice. But you have to offer an alternative to people who have spent much of the last 4 months defending Mr. Gbagbo's claim to the presidency and his rejection of Electoral Commission results that showed that Mr. Ouattara won that vote. General Mangou himself, in calling on members of Mr. Gbagbo's militant youth wing to lay down their weapons, well, it was only a few weeks ago that General Mangou helped rally those militants to defend Mr. Gbagbo.
Well, as a matter of fact, I wanted to ask you a question regarding General Mangou, especially given that he initially sought refuge or sanctuary in the South African embassy with his family and later rejoined Gbagbo. And now we see him in pictures standing next to President Alassane Ouattara. What sort of influence, frankly, does he have when he appeals, for example, to the followers of former President Laurent Gbagbo to come and join him with the new president?
You're very right about that. This episode where he took his wife and children to the residence of the South African ambassador in some of the heaviest fighting for Abidjan, I can only imagine undermines his position in the minds of more militant Gbagbo supporters who say, here's a man who deserted us. He went to seek refuge without us, with his wife and family. He did eventually come out of the embassy when it looked like things were returning to Mr. Gbagbo's way, and now he pledges his loyalty to Mr. Ouattara. That's not so surprising, though, for General Mangou, because over the last 10 days, the battle for control of Abidjan has gone back and forth between the Ouattara forces and Gbagbo forces. You have to remember, the Ouattara forces arrived here in Abidjan nearly 2 weeks ago. They rode through much of the country. They hit Abidjan. It seemed like things would be over, but they could not take the presidential compound because of the heavy weapons, the tanks, the rocket launchers, the anti-aircraft guns that were positioned around the presidential compound in Cocody. It was only after French and UN attack helicopters bombed those positions repeatedly that Ouattara forces, backed by French special forces, were finally able to capture Mr. Gbagbo.
Final question, Scott. Talk to us about the possible whereabouts of Mr. Gbagbo. Do you have a hunch as to where, in fact, he might be, except to know that perhaps he's physically out of Abidjan and probably somewhere in the northern part of the country?
Yes, that's our best understanding. Mr. Gbagbo, according to President Ouattara and the United Nations, has been moved out of the Gulf Hotel to what President Ouattara says is a villa where his rights as a former president will be respected. As you know, the Gulf Hotel was where Mr. Ouattara had been barricaded for more than 4 months by Gbagbo forces. While it's secure in that it's protected by more than 300 UN peacekeepers, there's no point in holding Mr. Gbagbo here in Abidjan, where he might be a focus of Gbagbo loyalists who would say, okay, here, our guy, he's here, let's fight our way into the Gulf to free him. Better, in the opinion of the United Nations and the new Ouattara government, to move him entirely out of Abidjan, but to keep him in the jurisdiction of Côte d'Ivoire and move him to this undisclosed location somewhere in the north where he's protected by UN peacekeepers and members of Ouattara forces. President Ouattara says that movement of Mr. Gbagbo in no way changes the fact that he will face national and international justice for crimes against the Ivorian people.
Well, thanks very much, Scott, for your insight, and please make sure that you take care of yourself and stay out of trouble.